What players belong on the Buffalo Bills Wall of Fame but are currently snubs? I have 10 players to submit as glaring omissions today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Thursday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, or if you are joining us on the YouTube channel, your first watch every day. Well, today we are going to talk about the Buffalo Bills Wall of Fame, and we're going to focus our conversation on the players that aren't on the Buffalo Bills Wall of Fame, but deserve to be part of the Buffalo Bills Wall of Fame. And so I have 10 different players that I want to submit to you as snubs. 10 players that if it were up to me, I would find a way to get these guys on there very, very soon because I think they're all extremely deserving. Now, before we get to the snubs, I do want to acknowledge the players and contributors and coaches that are part of the Buffalo Bills Wall of Fame. There's 31 people on the Bills Wall of Fame. And real quick, let me tell you how the team defines its selection process. This is directly from the Buffalo Bills. It says the Buffalo Bills Wall of Fame was created in 1980 to honor former players, administrators, and coaches who have played significant roles in the team's history. To be eligible for induction, an individual must have played with the Bills for at least 3 years and be retired from professional football. Also eligible are other individuals who have made outstanding contributions to the Bills, including administrators and coaches. Selections are made by a distinguished panel composed of club personnel and media members. So that's the criteria that the Buffalo Bills offer for being on the Wall of Fame. And again, it started in 1980. So it wasn't like something that existed back when the team first started up in 1960, which would make sense, right? You need guys to have time to establish themselves and earn being on the Wall of Fame. So let's work through the players on the Wall of Fame and administrators. And I'll give these to you in order of induction. So the first player inducted to the Bills Wall of Fame in 1980 was running back O.J. Simpson. In 1984, quarterback Jack Kemp obviously led the Bills to 2 AFL championships in the 60s. 1985, Pat McGroder, general manager. 1987, Tom Seastack, a defensive tackle. 1988, Billy Shaw, offensive lineman, also an NFL Hall of Famer. 1989, Ralph Wilson Jr., the owner. And I'll be honest with you, that was a little surprising to me. Not that Ralph's on the Wall of Fame, but I didn't realize that it was in 1989 that he was inducted. And certainly, he deserves a lot of credit for being able to get the team started and keep the team in Buffalo. And all that stuff is really, really cool. But I just didn't think that 1989 would be the year that he was inducted. 1992, the 12th man, the fans. How would you feel if they switched that to Bills Mafia? Instead of it saying the 12th man on the Wall of Fame, Bills Mafia, little switch there. I'd be in favor of it. What do you think? 1993, wide receiver Albert DeBunyan. 1994, linebacker Mike Stratton. 1995, quarterback Joe Ferguson. I've said this a few different times. In doing the research that I did to write the book Go Bills on the history of the Buffalo Bills, Joe Ferguson is a guy that I just gained so much appreciation for in terms of his tenure in Buffalo and some of the challenges that he faced. Sounds like he would have been a fun player to root for. 1996, Marv Levy. 1997, Joe DeLamielleure, offensive lineman, obviously a Pro Football Hall of Famer as well. Marv Levy, Ralph Wilson, also Pro Football Hall of Famers. 1998, Robert James, a cornerback, got inducted. 1999, Edward Ambrosky, a trainer. In 2000, Bob Kalsu. Let me tell you about Bob Kalsu, because this is probably one of the stories that maybe not enough people know about regarding a very significant player in team history, despite only playing one season with the Bills. So in 1968, he was drafted, and he was a starter as a rookie. He was an offensive lineman in 1968. And then following the 1968 season, to satisfy his ROTC obligation, he entered the U.S. Army as a second lieutenant and arrived in South Vietnam in November 1969 as part of the 101st Airborne Division. And then on July 21st, 1970, Kalsu was killed in action at the Battle of Fire Support Base Ripcord when his unit came under enemy attack. So a very tragic story there, and a guy that had a career in professional football, was a rookie starter, and was fulfilling his obligations and was a casualty. So a very sad story there, but certainly a player in person that deserved to be honored. And so he got inducted into the Bills Wall of Fame in 2000. 2001, defensive tackle Fred Smearless got inducted. Also in 2001, Jim Kelly, quarterback. You guys know about him, right? 2001, also George Samies, a safety. 2002, Kent Hull, offensive lineman. 2003, Darryl Talley, linebacker. 2004, Jim Richter, offensive lineman. 2005, Thurman Thomas, running back. 2006, Andre Reed, wide receiver. 2007, Steve Tasker, wide receiver, special teamer. 2008, my dude, Bruce Smith, defensive end. 2010, Booker Edgerton, quarterback. 2011, Phil Hansen, defensive end. 2012, Bill Polian, general manager. 2014, Van Miller, obviously the legendary broadcaster and voice of the Bills. 2015, Lou Saban, coach, and that's one that was way overdue for what he did, taking over the team in 1962, leading the Bills to consecutive AFL championships in 64 and 65, and then came back in the 70s. But obviously, the only championship winning coach in team history. And, there's some politics involved there for sure as to, why Ralph Wilson strong-armed him from being on the wall. And, it's just a really weird situation dating back to when he resigned as head coach of the Bills to become the head coach at Maryland. Like, that doesn't make sense. So there's some weird stuff that happened along the way, but certainly a man who accomplished a ton with the team and did not deserve to wait until 2015 to get inducted to the Wall of Fame. And then the last person inducted to the Wall of Fame was in 2017. Cookie Gilchrist, running back. And that was another one that you kind of feel like Ralph Wilson strong-armed. There was some politics there, some really weird contract dynamics that existed with Cookie Gilchrist, and had to wait way, way too long to get on the Ring of Honor or the Wall of Fame. So he was the last player inducted in 2017. And, that kind of sets us up really well to get into the actual snubs that I want to offer to you, because it's been a long time. I mean, they haven't inducted anyone since 2017. And to me, that's just a missed opportunity to take advantage of getting these very deserving players on the Wall of Fame. So I'm very hopeful that the pace accelerates here, and maybe you get 2 or 3 done over the next couple of seasons to get caught up here. In 2001, you put 3 in. So why can't you have multiple again in an upcoming season? So definitely some players here that we're going to get into that are way overdue. But first, let me tell you about our sponsor today, which is Dave. If you're living paycheck to paycheck or struggling to make ends meet, it can be really stressful when unexpected expenses come up. Now, Dave can help you get out of a pinch when you really need it. Dave is the banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with extra cash. That's more money to fill your gas tank, buy a wedding gift, or just catch up on bills. You can finally tackle those expenses that have been stressing you out without any hangups. There's no interest and no credit card check needed, and millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get the financial relief they need with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch and need some extra help, download Dave and think of it as a helping hand from future you. Download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's DAVE. Sign up for extra cash and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve. Member FDIC. Future you will thank you. All right, so I have 10 snubs. Let's get into it here. I try to stay true to the criteria that the Bills label and define for who gets onto the Wall of Fame. Now, this is obviously fully my bias, right? This is the way that I feel in terms of making a significant impact. So these are the 10 players that I came up with. The order that I'm going to give them to you, it's not really important. It's not like I'm going in order of biggest snub to least biggest snub. It's mostly chronological, to be completely honest with you. So don't really pay too much attention to the order. It's not significant. But I do want to lead off with the poster boy for snubs on the Bills Wall of Fame. It's Butch Bird. Butch Bird, a cornerback for the team, 1964 through 1970. 5-time Pro Bowl selection for the Bills. He's the team's career leader in interceptions with 40. He's a career leader in interception return yards with 666. And he leads the team in interceptions returned for a touchdown with 5. Certainly a much more productive player than Booker Edgerton, who was his running mate there as, the cornerback opposite of him in the 60s. And Butch Bird's not on this. And that's really, really surprising. I'm not sure if there's any politics that I'm unaware of. But, you're leading the team all time. Like, literally, you've held on to this record for 60 years. Seems like an obvious choice to be on the Bills Wall of Fame. Tim Graham from The Athletic recently did a really good article outlining the case for Butch Bird. And so hopefully that helps him gain some traction and get the recognition that he deserves as one of the legendary players in team history. The next player I want to bring up, offensive lineman, guard, Reggie McKenzie, starter for the Bills from 1972 through 1982. He was Joe DeLamelier's running mate at guard. 11-year starter for the Bills, part of that electric company offensive line that paved the way for O.J. Simpson to have all the success that he did in Buffalo. They called it the electric company because it turned on the juice, and obviously O.J.'s nickname was the Juice. 3-time All-Pro Reggie McKenzie was for the Buffalo Bills, and obviously a big reason why O.J. Simpson was able to rush for 2,000 yards in 1973, the first ever 2,000-yard campaign in NFL history. So put some respect on Reggie McKenzie's name and get him on the Buffalo Bills Wall of Fame. The next one is maybe a player that will surprise you, but I just have a lot of respect for his longevity and his accomplishments with the team. I'm referring to safety Steve Freeman, member of the Bills from 1975 through 1986. 12 years, a fixture in the Bills secondary, started 132 games, collected 23 interceptions, 8 fumble recoveries, and is one of just 8 players, in team history to play in more than 175 games with the team. So was Steve Freeman ever a dominant player? Probably not. And I'm not going to sit here and act like I watched him play in depth. But I have a lot of respect for somebody who started 132 games, 23 interceptions, and is one of only 8 players in franchise history to play in more than 175 games. I think there's a lot to respect about his legacy as a member of the Buffalo Bills. Now, the rest of these players here, these are going to be some real familiar names. So maybe you're not super in tune with the Butch Birds and the Reggie McKenzies and the Steve Freemans and, what happened in the 60s and 70s and early 80s. Well, you're going to know about the rest of these players. These are all much more current members of the team that I think will be very recognizable names. The next player I'll get into is Reuben Brown, guard, part of the Bills from 95 through 2003. And during that stretch, Reuben was one of the best offensive linemen in the game. He was selected to 9 Pro Bowls with the Buffalo Bills. Selected to 9 Pro Bowls and started 136 games. My notes are crossed up here a little bit. 9-time Pro Bowler, 136 game starter, just an absolute stud. It was like clockwork that Reuben Brown went to the Pro Bowl every year. There was a point in time where I thought he was the best player on the team. So definitely a player that, what are we waiting for here? This guy's been retired for a long time. I think it's kind of getting to the point now where he's one of the most underappreciated players in team history. Reuben Brown, big-time omission. How about Eric Moulds? Wide receiver, member of the team from 96 through 2005. 2-time Pro Bowl selection. Over 9,000 receiving yards in 10 seasons with the Bills. Number 2 in team history, behind Andre Reed in receiving. Also the first player in franchise history to reach 100 catches in a single season. And certainly, made a big impression as a kick returner as well early in his career. Eric Moulds, obviously a big-time omission in my mind, a snub, somebody that needs to get on the Wall of Fame real soon. The next is one of my most favorite players in team history, one of the most underrated guys in team history, referring to Terrence McGee on the Bills from 2003 through 2012. Very clearly the best kick returner in team history. It's not close. Averaged over 26 yards per kick return on 207 attempts. He's the team all-time leader in kick return yards with 5,450. Also number 1 in kick returns for a touchdown at 5. And he also has the longest kick return in team history, 104 yards against the Dolphins in 2004. Now, Terrence McGee, not just an elite kick returner, he was a really good cornerback as well. He's the Buffalo Bills franchise leader in passes defended with 99. Also leads the Buffalo Bills all-time in career fumble return yards with 106. This guy was on the team for a long time. All-time leader in kick return yards, all-time leader in kick return touchdowns, all-time leader in passes defended, all-time leader in career fumble return yards. Put some respect on Terrence McGee. And here's a fun story about Terrence McGee, and this is why part of why I think I'm so drawn to Terrence McGee. So he was drafted in the 4th round, if I'm not mistaken, in 2003. And that was right when I became very passionate about the NFL draft. And I just fell in love with it, right? And so that was when I started to study players and make scouting reports and make big boards and all those types of things. And, I really wanted to know all the players that the Bills were drafting. It was like my life's mission to make sure that if the Bills drafted a player, that I knew who he was. And it wasn't a situation where they drafted a player and I'd have to go and research it and learn about the player. I wanted to know who they were. And then the Bills drafted Terrence McGee in the 4th round out of Northwestern State. And I never heard of him. After doing all this work to make sure that this wouldn't happen, I didn't know the 4th round pick. It's not like a 7th rounder or something like that. It was a 4th rounder. And so when that happened, like, it ignited me even more. And I told myself this wasn't going to happen again. The Bills weren't going to draft some player in the 4th round that I never heard of again. And so Terrence McGee and I have a little history that he probably doesn't know anything about. And obviously had a great career in Buffalo. And he's a player that I won't forget. Actually, behind me, somewhere behind me, there's a Terrence McGee football card that my grandfather gave me, my grandpa Don gave me. And it says your inspiration for draft work. And it's like in a plastic case of Terrence McGee. The next player, Aaron Schobel, defensive end, part of the team from 2001 to 2009, 2-time Pro Bowl selection. He's number 2 in team history for sacks with 78. Obviously, Bruce Smith, the all-time leader. Number 2, Aaron Schobel. The next player, Brian Moorman, a punter, part of the team from 2001 to 2012, and then also kind of came back in 2013. That was kind of weird. He went to the Cowboys for like a few games, then came back to the Bills. 2-time Pro Bowl selection, member of the NFL 2000s All-Decade Team, all-time leader in punts and punt yardage. And for his career, this is a pretty crazy number. For Brian Moorman's career, he averaged 43.7 yards per punt in Buffalo. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that would tell you that there were seasons where Brian Moorman was the best player on the team in terms of how good they are at that position. We're not going to sit here and act like Brian Moorman was a guy that measures up with Aaron Schobel at defensive end, but for how good of a punter Brian Moorman was, you know, there's a case to be made that he was the best player on the team in terms of what they're asked to do. We've got 2 more for you. Fred Jackson, the next player, running back, member of the Bills from 2007 through 2014. Obviously one of the most revered players in franchise history. And, you know, he definitely just kind of fits with Buffalo, right? Just a grinder, goes to a very small school, NFL Europe. He's that practice squad guy. Fred Jackson's why people fall in love with Christian Wade. Fred Jackson's why people fall in love with Duke Williams, right? This is why. And Fred Jackson's very much the exception. I mean, what this guy was able to accomplish is unbelievable. Do everything guy for the Bills. Number 3 in team history for rushing yards, behind OJ and Thurman. 8 seasons. Across 8 seasons, he averaged over 1,000 yards for scrimmage. In 2009, this is something super cool that we don't talk enough about. 2009, Fred Jackson became the first player in NFL history to accumulate 1,000 rushing yards and 1,000 kick return yards during a single season. Wonder if we'll ever see something like that again. Probably not. You know, just the way he played the game, right? Fred Jackson played during a tough stretch of history for the Buffalo Bills, but you were proud as hell to have that guy on your team, right? Blue-collar guy, ran hard. Pass protection, he was outstanding. He caught the football, played teams. Like one of your best players, and he'd do anything, right? Ultimate teammate, ultimate good guy, ultimate guy that you're proud of to say was a member of the team, and you'll respect him forever. He's everything you would want to encapsulate and embody for a guy that's going to go on the Wall of Fame. And you can copy-paste everything I just said about Fred Jackson and apply it to the last player that I'm going to get into, and that's Kyle Williams. Defensive tackle, 2006 through 2018. 6-time Pro Bowl selection. He was the heart and soul of the organization for a long stretch of time. Just like Fred Jackson, one of the most revered players to ever play in Buffalo, a guy that we're always going to be proud of. You can go buy yourself a 95 jersey right now, and you'll never be ashamed to put that thing on. The way he plays the game, unbelievable, right? Midday 3 pick out of LSU, comes to the NFL and kicks ass. One of my favorite players to watch. Again, true Buffalo guy, right? I know he's from Louisiana, but it's a blue-collar guy, late round picked, ultimate underdog story, has a legendary career, and is one of the most respected players that will ever put on a Buffalo Bills uniform. So there you have it, my Buffalo Bills snubs for the Wall of Fame. Real quick, Butch Bird, Reggie McKenzie, Steve Freeman, Reuben Brown, Eric Moulds, Terrence McGee, Aaron Schobel, Brian Moorman, Fred Jackson, and Kyle Williams. Now, there's some players that are on this team right now that, I hope we'll be pounding for in a while, right? Think about Josh Allen and Trey White, and Steph Diggs, Deion Dawkins, Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer. There's a lot of guys that I hope when I do this podcast in 20 years, I'll be mentioning. But for now, that's the list. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. Tomorrow, we are going to do an offensive line discussion. We'll break it down just like we did the running backs and tight ends and wide receivers. Offensive line tomorrow. So don't miss it. Make sure that you're subscribed. We'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.